Hi, everyone. I'm Ray Richmond, the news and features editor here at Gold Derby, and I'm here today with Bel Powley, who portrays Miep Gies, the woman who helped hide Anne Frank and her extended family from the Nazis in the Nat Geo Disney Plus Hulu eight-part limited series A Small Light that premieres May 1st. Bel, one thing that struck me about this story as it's told here is that Miep isn't portrayed as any kind of saint but just as a real human being doing what humans do. And I know
Mm.
that's what the real life me believe too.
Yeah, that really was her kind of mantra until she died at 101, actually. She lived a long, long life. And yeah, and her mantra really was don't put me on a pedestal, don't call me a hero. No one should ever think that they have to be special in order to help others. And it's where the title of our show comes from, The Small Light. It's from a quote that Miep used to end her talks with, which was anyone, even ordinary secretary or teenager or housewife, can turn on a small light in a dark room. She really wanted us to be able to see ourselves in her and us to recognize that everyone has that good inside of them and, anyone can do the right thing.
And we saw in the first part of A Small Life that you're a regular young woman in late 1930s Amsterdam drinking and partying and enjoying life and not some studious heroic dusty figure.
Yeah, yeah, and in those ways, that's what makes her so relatable. That's what I related to it. I can relate to going out with my mates and feeling a bit directionless in your early 20s and falling in love for the first time and partying too much. Like, those are the things that make her a kind of every woman. And I think it's really important that if we're going to, rehash this part of history and, tell the story of Anne Frank that people know all too well, that we do it in this kind of relatable way to make people connect. And Meep is a really good way into that.
It's such an easy thing, to try to make it contemporary, make it today.
Mm.
Yet I've never seemingly seen that in kind of in a period piece. Um,
Yeah.
and it's fascinating to see, it makes it that much more powerful, not less powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, that's what drew me to the project in the first place. Is I often have shied away from period pieces because I find it hard to connect to them. Maybe because of the language, or sometimes because you're in these costumes, you can feel a bit trussed up, like you feel distanced from it. Whereas with this and with Tony and Joan, our creators' choice of having everyone speak in kind of modern day speak, it closed that kind of gap and you just immediately feel connected to it.
The thing is, everyone, particularly Jews like myself, felt like they know, and I knew the story of Anne and the secret annex, up, down, and sideways. But the Miep Gies part has largely kind of fallen through the cracks, even though she did a documentary in the past, and I know there was a book. Somehow that story has not resonated down through recent history, like Anne Frank's story itself. So it seems like you're kind of setting a little bit of a tone and putting that out there in a way that it hasn't been done over the
Yeah,
last several decades.
absolutely. And I think in terms of our industry, in terms of film and television, I think one of the reasons is that pre Me Too, like people weren't making shows or spending money on, making shows with stories about women. For I've been searching for a role like this my entire career, but like, for most of my career, people didn't make shows about people like Meep. And post Me Too, there are all of these incredible kind of female heroes coming out of the woodwork that people are, finally wanting to write about. So it's a really exciting moment, and I can't wait to share Meep's story with the world.
What else can we learn about this story that we didn't already know? And why do you think it deserves this sort of ongoing attention?
Well, I mean, I don't think people know about Meep, and also I don't think people know much about what was going on in Amsterdam and about the Dutch resistance. Meep and her husband Jan ended up working for the Dutch resistance, and viewers will see as they watch the show that they ended up helping many other Jews and saving kids and saving babies. Like this pretty they did some pretty heroic and incredible things. And I do think it's important, people know the story of Anne Frank and she's kind of been immortalized in the diary. And people, will just think about it kind of like as a book. And what we're trying to do here is like humanize the family and humanize Anne and humanize these characters again to make people connect and also make people think about, what would I do? Because that part of history, the 40s, there are many parallels to what's going on in the world today. So if we're gonna, rehash this part of history, I think it's important that it's kind of relatable and make people kind of, like connect it to what's going on right now.
That's the thing is that makes it even more contemporary, I think, Belle, is that are so many relatable elements to this to today. And it's far more relevant than we probably even want it to be.
Absolutely. I mean, anti-Semitism is massively on the rise. Um, there are more displaced people in the world now than there ever have been before. We know we're living through a huge refugee crisis, the war in Ukraine, like authoritarian regimes popping up all over the world. Like there are so many parallels. So I guess in some ways maybe our show is a bit of a cautionary tale. Yeah, about how quickly society can like fall into the same horrible patterns.
You know, even as a Jew growing up, I never really quite understood what was behind anti-Semitism, or, you would think it's just some kind of phase, but it always comes back.
Yeah,
And
I mean, yeah.
why? You wonder what did the Jews do to these
I
different segments of society to deserve this kind of persecution?
I'm
It's
yeah.
baffling. It doesn't make sense.
I'm Jewish as well, and I was raised Jewish, and I asked myself the same questions. I don't know, man. Like, it is baffling. It's not nice.
It seems like we get a different sort of Anne Frank here too, much more precocious and teen-like and non-victimy, which I think
Yeah.
is also more relatable than
Totally.
that figure.
Yeah, I mean, she was, but the years that Anne was in the annex, she was 13 to 15. I mean, I was a teenage girl once, and I can only tell you, like, there's a really intense time for a young woman. And so, yeah, in some ways, our story for Meep in a different way, but also for Anne, is like it's a bit of a coming of age story. And I think Billy Boulay, our Anne, like her like playing of Anne is just so grounded and natural and relatable, and I think she's done a really fantastic job, and she's made it her own, but also kind of yeah, I think it's really great.
I've often wondered if she would have written her diary, maybe a dumb question or observation, if she could have
But
would have written her diary differently if she'd known it was going to become so world famous and such a
well, you know that she
uh,
did. So we do include this in our show. She'd actually already she'd written the diary, and about I think a couple of months like before D-Day, like a couple of months before they got discovered, they heard on the radio the Queen saying everyone needs to preserve your diaries and preserve letters and stuff, because when this war is over, we're going to need to use them. So Anne actually went back to the beginning of her diary and started rewriting it, because she was like, the Queen wants my diary, and this is going to be like, she was like, I want this to be something. So that's why there were actually all of these loose pages that when Meep went to find the diary in the annex, she went to collect up their valuables after they were taken, and there was the diary and then also all of these loose pages, because Anne had been rewriting it from the beginning already. She wanted it to be like famous, but
right. But that's the
and she
thing.
knew it was good. Like, she knew she was a good writer.
Indeed, she was, and that's the thing that's particularly interesting here, Belle. Is I mean, no Meep, no diary. If Meep had
Yeah.
not preserved this thing, this story would have died, and there would have would have been
Absolutely. And,
understandable.
she wasn't preserving it because she was like, this is going to be a famous book, obviously. She just went upstairs. As soon as the Nazis left, when they took everyone out the annex, the first thing that Miep and Jan did was go upstairs and just collect up all the valuables, because what the Nazis would do would come and ransack the place and send all of the valuables to Germany. So they collected Otto's briefcase and, watches and jewelry and stuff. And she saw Anne's diary on the ground and she thought, that's really important to her. She's a young woman. I know this diary is important to her. It's been her kind of lifeline for the last 2 years. So she just saved it because she was like, I'll give it to her when she comes back. And Miep had so much hope that the girls were going to come back. And then when very sadly they found out that the girls had died at Bergen-Belsen, she took the diary out of her desk drawer and she handed it to Otto and she said, this is your daughter's legacy. Yeah. And so, yeah, we have her to thank for it, I guess.
I imagine you became a Miep Gies expert throughout this process.
Yeah.
Such an honor to play this woman.
Yeah, absolutely. She's really incredible.
What talk about the small light production itself? How long was the shoot? And it seemed like, from what I've read and what I've seen of your interviews, everyone got on very well.
Yeah, it was about a 5 month shoot. We shot it in blocks, so we did episodes 1, 2, 3 together, then 4 and 5, then 6, 7, 8. In the middle, we shot in Prague on sound stages. Our in production designer Mark Holmes literally built the entire annex and Opekta offices, like a complete duplicate, in these sound stages in Prague. The sets were absolutely incredible. And then we shot a lot of the exteriors in Amsterdam. We were lucky enough, and it was completely invaluable to us. We were able to go there and we shot all of the canal stuff and the cycling. And we shot outside the Frank's original apartment, Moeda Plain in Amsterdam. It was a very special day. And it was a long shoot, and we were very pushed for time sometimes. I was working kind of 14 hours a day every day for 5 months. And obviously the subject matter is, it's heavy, and, we're doing heavy stuff a lot. So I think that really brought the cast and crew together. And Liev was saying yesterday, and I totally agree with him, that sometimes when you're doing something this intense, you're forced to have a good time. Like we had a good time on the weekends basically, because you need a release, and it really did bring everyone together. So we really were this kind of ensemble, and we went out for loads of nice dinners, and we had a fun karaoke night once. I don't know, we blew off steam together and really looked after each other, because I think that is the only kind of way to get through it. Otherwise you really do kind of drive yourself into the ground, I guess.
So you really do take this material to heart while you're doing it. It's not like, oh, you leave it at the office and you're just a performer, and the heaviness of the
Yeah,
material
it's
stays with you.
it's hard not to, with the heavy, and also because of the tone we were going for, this kind of modern tone. Like what I was saying before, I didn't feel distance from it. I really felt like I was in it a lot all the time. So by the time we got to shooting episodes 6, 7, 8, which was later on in the shoot, once I really knew Billy and Ashley so well, who played Anne and Margot. Once we got to the scene in episode 8 when I find out that the girls have died and they're not coming back, it felt incredibly emotional for me, because I knew it just felt very real. I could really empathize with the character, and yeah, there were certain scenes that were just really difficult to film, and that for me was one of them.
How often during production did you think to yourself, I wonder if I would have had the courage to do this?
Honestly, all the time. I still think it, and I keep saying, obviously, but that's what we want audiences to think. We want people to self-reflect and say, what would I do? And I'm still asking myself the same question. I think that I would do. I like to say I think I would do the right thing, and I do think that kind of Miep's kind of message, if there is one, is that we all do have that good inside of us. We are hardwired to know inherently what the right thing to do is. It's just about whether you execute that or not, I guess.
It's really interesting though, Belle. At the beginning, Miep certainly isn't presented as someone who would have this inside her to be able to do this.
Yeah, I guess so. But she had a pretty intense upbringing herself that I think is what feeds into her courage. She was an immigrant herself in Amsterdam. She was actually born in Vienna, and after the First World War, she was a starving child along with a lot of kids in Vienna, and she was sent away. There was like an initiative to like send these starving kids to like other European countries to be adopted and essentially like have their lives saved. And she was sent away at 9 years old with a number around her neck on a train and adopted into a Dutch family, into a language that she couldn't even speak. And I think that experiencing the selflessness probably of her birth mother sending her away to save her life, and of her adoptive parents are taking in this kid when they already had like three other kids and like teaching her the language, and just because they were good people. I think you take that selflessness like with you into the rest of your life. And then also I think you grow an incredibly thick skin from those experiences. I think that it made her tough. Yeah.
Did you meet any other Holocaust survivors? Anyone who knew Miep?
I we
Did I see
actually
her
we met her,
granddaughter, right?
yeah, we met her granddaughter. Her son, actually, Meep's son died last year, but her granddaughter Janine, she came to visit us on set actually during a really intense day of filming, the one I was just talking about in episode 8 at the train station. She was with us for 2 days, and she also came to our premiere in Amsterdam. It was really very special.
It's just a beautifully done series. I'm just incredibly powerful and beautifully presented. And I know you believe that too, because otherwise you wouldn't be promoting it this hard.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But probably I would imagine you're done with Holocaust projects for the moment. What else have you got coming up in the way of
Yeah.
projects?
I actually, straight after we wrapped in November, I hopped on a plane and went upstate New York to Rochester, and I filmed in Indy with a director called Michael Tybersky, which was very different and very fun. It was kind of an absurd, quite like Yorgos Lanthimos in tone, and kind of dystopian romance. So it was nice to go on to something completely different. And yeah, so that's in the edit now, and we'll see what happens with it this year. But right now, I'm just focused on promoting this show, which, as you said, I do believe in a lot, and I want everyone to watch it.
But by the same token, you needed a little bit of an exhale with your next project.
Yeah.
Um, uh, it it helps, I'm sure, in terms of your acting career, that you have this sort of ageless look. You could be 16 or 35. You could
Wow,
be
thank you. I think 16 maybe is a bit of a push now, but I appreciate that.
with the right makeup, I could see you still being a late teenager. Um,
Thank you.
uh, well, with that, we're out of time. Bel Powley, thank you so much for this time. Bel can be seen in a small light beginning May 1st on Nat Geo, and the next day streaming over Disney Plus and Hulu. Thanks so much for the time, and the best of luck to you.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Thanks. Nice to meet you.